Hey there, friends. My name is Jim, and tanks are rolling, bombs are blasting, and emergency alerts are alerting. So stick with me, and I'll let you know exactly what's happening on this, our path to World War III. Now, I don't mean to be overly alarmist with that type of rhetoric, but this is an actual stepping stone that could lead towards World War III if that is what our elites would want to have happen. Because, if you didn't watch my last video, there's been some contested issues within Ukraine for a long time. Since 2014, there was an area in Ukraine known as the Donbas region. There are a couple cities, you'd call them Donetsk and Luhansk. And those considered themselves independent of Ukraine once the ceasefire happened. Everybody basically agreed that they're kind of part of Ukraine, but they consider themselves independent, whatever. In the same way that Taiwan considers itself independent, but China still considers it China. If the rest of the world goes by China because they're more powerful, so they can call themselves independent, but they're still technically under our flag. Yesterday, when Putin went out and made his speech, he announced that he considers the Donbas region independent of Ukraine, which is actually, as Trump came out to say, a particularly genius move on his end, because by considering them independent, he's saying Ukraine has no claim to this land. So I'm not invading Ukraine. I'm just doing a peacekeeping mission, moving into Donbas, because Ukraine considers, Ukraine may be doing some sort of unkind things to our Russian brothers and sisters there. So we're just going on a peacekeeping mission to see what's going on. Generally, that's what the rest of us, well, I will speak for myself. Generally, that's what I thought. I assumed that this was a way for him to bully Ukraine out of joining NATO, because in NATO's charter, it says that you have to have no contested borders within the borders of your country if you want to be part of NATO. Now, of course, they could still do something, NATO still could do something with Ukraine like what they did with Colombia, where they're kind of a NATO partner, but not part of NATO. However, this was Putin saying, no, none of this is going to happen. There's contested borders. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go check out those contested borders. And it was, in my opinion, his way of saying, look, we're cutting off all this Ukraine-NATO nonsense. It ain't going to happen. And the more you want to push it, the more this kind of stuff's going to happen. I assume that's where he would leave it, considering that he said that there was a tentative meeting set up by President Macron of France between him and Biden to see what kind of communication they could have going. In my opinion, Putin probably didn't think there was much worth to that meeting, considering the lack of power that our military and our country is currently showing to the rest of the world. We were so pathetic getting out of Afghanistan that we ended up leaving hostages there that had to be rescued by veterans who were no longer in the military so they could go around the chain of command, just showing how weak we are and how the mandate of the president to do military moves is no longer just a given. Now, I'm on a couple different group chats full of people from Ukraine who heard just a few minutes ago a large explosion in Maidan. Maidan is the town square of Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine. So I want you to take a real quick look at this little map here, and every little spot, this little yellow spot that I've made here, aside from Luhansk and Donetsk, are spots where people have either heard explosions or there's been some kind of military activity. There's a ton more than just these spots. This is from like an hour ago. I've been kind of lurking through different threads of different Twitter posts, and there's a lot more than this, but these are the ones that I heard of from people in my group chats. So, that people were worried about just the fact that he was doing peacekeeping missions in Luhansk and Donetsk, but Kiev, the capital's all the way over here. He probably wasn't going to futz around and go into that. However, it looks like that decision has been made. And Marco Rubio has come out and said, according to him, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is now underway. It was no longer just a talking point, according to him. And he is the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. So he's not just a random another associate politician who's talking about this. He actually has sway, and him saying this is basically the U.S. government, the Senate intelligent portion of the U.S. government saying, yeah, we now consider this an invasion of Ukraine. It's not just somebody going into some contested territories. He followed it up with, in the hours to come, Russia will conduct strikes on air defense systems, move to cut off Kyiv from eastern Ukraine, move to cut off Ukraine's military forces on the line of contact in the east to prevent them from falling back to defend Kyiv. It's followed Dmitry Alperovich, who is reporting on this, saying, Putin to NATO, we are ready for all outcomes. All decisions have been made. This is after Marco Rubio came out and said this, so he's basically saying, look, I heard what you said. I already made my decision. I'm already doing my thing. Whatever outcome happens, we already got a plan for it. This is probably the one thing that the U.S. and Europe had over Russia to keep them from doing this kind of thing, honestly, was Nord Stream 2. And with Germany just straight up cutting off Nord Stream 2 once Russia decided to go into Donetsk and Luhansk, he really doesn't have much to bargain with anymore. The economic sanctions that have been really detrimental to the country has existed forever. They're not going to get rid of him as long as he's in the Kremlin. And now the Nord Stream 2 shut off. They're not going to let him do that as long as he's in the Kremlin. So he's like, no, I'm just going to take all of Ukraine now. We have a weak president of the United States. We have a weak EU, weak NATO. Everybody in the rest is weak. And do you know who I have behind me? Says Putin. I have China, and they said they would respect any integrity of my nation that I consider so. It's China and Russia versus all these weak people who have been provably weak over the last couple of years. But to go through this a little bit, this was earlier today at noon. Breaking: Russian occupation forces closed Khanhar checkpoint in Crimea without explaining reasons. Now that would be this little area down here. This is checkpoint Khanhar, which is the Ukrainian-Crimea border. Crimean Peninsula is what was taken from Ukraine in the 2014 skirmishes that were going on. So that is considered Crimea kind of sort of within Russia's sphere of influence and not so much Ukraine. So they have this checkpoint here, and there was a border camera that you could watch all the time, and it has gone out as of a few hours ago. According to this guy, at 5:21 p.m., the Khanhar border post camera went offline, and immediately following that they also call it the Kalachenk outpost, because this is Kalanchek, and I believe that's the same outpost. I could be wrong about that. Either way, it goes to show that there are cameras at these border crossings that are going out. Beyond that, there's actually people who are saying that there were people running from these. Here we go. Crimea. Kalachenk outpost is under attack. Ukrainian soldiers and civilians running away. So this is to go to show that there's actually Russian forces moving through a place that is not considered Ukraine into a place that is considered Ukraine, and that is not at all these jurisdictions that are being contested, meaning that Russia is meaningfully moving into Ukraine specifically to invade areas that are not contested. They are starting this war. This is Bryce Wilson saying Kramatorsk is being attacked. That's another one that I put in my little list. Here's an unconfirmed video from Mariupol. Mariupol, just so you know, is right over here. So you have the Donbas region, Donetsk and Luhansk, and Mariupol obviously by itself down here, unfortunately. And this is the video of what they heard. Kind of just explosions randomly throughout, you know. I'd be worried if it was me, personally. Moving on. Latest footage from the front in Donbas. Sounds of intensified shelling can be heard in the village of Talakiva, east of Mariupol. So this is in the same general region. There's not really a lot that you can see here, but there's a lot of sounds, more explosions, shelling, boom, boom, boom. I feel so bad for these people, because these people didn't know this was going to happen yesterday. I mean, they had some idea, but nobody knew this would be the case today. Even if they say they knew, they were just guessing, and it probably wasn't that great of a guess. Here is a video from east of Mariupol of this gentleman's apartment. Imagine living here. Imagine being this guy. You know. And then Putin decided to come out and have a little speech. And I listened to it. Unfortunately, there wasn't a live translation, so I literally don't know what it said. But according to the translators, Putin accuses Kyiv of genocide for 8 years, saying they have crossed the red line. He's claiming that they're specifically Nazi forces there. There is a National Socialist group in Ukraine that's part of the military. So Putin says, I have declared a special military operation. The goal is the demilitarization of Ukraine and the punishment of Nazis and criminals. Putin calls on Ukrainian service members to, quote, lay down their arms and go home. Putin says military action will seek to demilitarize Ukraine. And then Kramatorsk being attacked. NATO saying they're ready for all outcomes. I'm sorry, Putin saying that they are ready for all NATO outcomes. So This is getting into a much more racialized conflict and more specific parts of this, where people are saying that the people of Russian descent in Ukraine are being treated as lower class citizens, or even being genocided, as he would like to claim. And in order to fix that, they're going to need to be demilitarized. What that would mean is that Ukraine doesn't need a military anymore. Well, who's protecting them? You know, it's kind of reminiscent of those old movies when you would see a mafia come into town and they would go into the people's shop and they'd smash a window or something and be like, wow, it's a shame you're getting hit. Who's going to protect you from all this racket? And then, boom, oh, we'll protect you. What I'm saying is, obviously, Russia is, if they're demilitarized, they don't want the West being the military that protects them. They're going to say, we will protect you with our military because you are part of our sphere of influence. Here's a screenshot of CNN teams hearing explosions in and around Kyiv. Again, explosions, you know, it's one thing because it could be coming or going from anywhere. But Kyiv is way the fuck over here. I've heard person on Lukianivska Street also heard the explosions. So the battling happening over here and possibly down here. Over here is a whole different thing that they're talking about, and that makes it a little bit more worrying. This is a video posted from Crimea per the video author. The description, this little caption says, hundreds of vehicles go to the border with Ukraine. So let's take a look at that. Oh, phew. Blow my ears off, why don't you? Yeah, that's just copyrighted music. Anyways, the important thing is that you can see here tanks rolling through. According to them, hundreds of them, you know, 30 kilometers away from Ukrainian territory. So this is heating up, and the Turkish Air Force is now landing planes in Kyiv as well. Now, I'm not sure what that means, if that means that Turkey is going to take the side of Ukraine, or if this means that they're being invaded from Turkey and I would assume that the Turkish Air Force is helping out. But you never know with these kind of international conflicts where this is going to go. And the problem that I have with this, now, we've gone through the timeline a little bit, and I just want to give you my interpretation of what's going to happen here. Because of the Western leaders' insistence on our need to print more money and expand our currency pool over this COVID relief fund, through all these different COVID relief funds that have gone through all these different governments, the massive printing of money, while we've lowered production, specifically we've closed down businesses, we've shut down different supply chains all up and down the chain for all kinds of different commodities. And what with lowering production but raising the currency pool, that is the equation that any economist will tell you leads to inflation and even hyperinflation. You saw the Jack Dorsey, the previous head of Twitter, tweeting hyperinflation is coming. Elon Musk tweeting about hyperinflation. This is something that's been seen, and over the last week or so, every single time the markets have taken a downward plunge because of the very obvious manipulation of currency that the elites have been doing. What happens? Oh, it's because of a Russian thing. It's because of Russian this or Russian that. Well, I just want to point out that prior to this, prior to today and yesterday, prior to Putin's announcement about his 45 years of history that he had this huge speech about, prior to all of that, Putin was just living his life like he always does. He was loading up tanks on the border like he always does because he has these aspirations for a new USSR. But this time, the U.S. just decided to have to keep poking him and say, we need our missiles in Ukraine to defend against you. While Russia's going, what do you mean? You're putting missiles right in my face? That seems overly dramatic. You pushed them into having to do what they're doing. I'm not saying that what they're doing is a good thing. I don't think so. I think Ukraine should have its own sovereignty and be allowed its own abilities and its own to have its own future. But because of what we've done, because of this strategic alliance with Ukraine specifically in order to make Russia more of a enemy instead of an ally, we've made it so that Ukraine is either going to be under the sphere of influence of the West, of the United States and of Biden, or of Putin and of China and of the Eastern countries. This never had to happen, but in order to cover up the criminal misdeeds of all of these elites around the COVID spending, where it came from, the lab leak hypothesis, all of this very important news needed to be covered up, necessarily needed to be covered up, and the financial crash that's coming will necessarily be blamed on Putin and Russia. When Biden came out and made his speech, I believe today, he said, the U.S. is going to bear the burden of fighting for peace elsewhere. He said that our prices are going to go up. Our gas is, of course, going to go up. All of the gas going up, I want people to remember, one of the biggest things that made gas go up from where it was a year ago to where it is now was Putin. I'm sorry, Freudian slip there. Was Biden saying that they needed to close down the Keystone XL pipeline, which sent signals all throughout the oil markets saying that, oh, well, we need not invest in oil because Biden probably won't let us for the next 4 years. Meaning that the price of oil keeps going up because they can be judged by whatever Saudi Arabia decides it's going to be, based on the geopolitical feelings at the time. Now, Nord Stream 2, a gas pipeline that was going to go around the US and go around Saudi Arabia, just so happens to have shut down. Meaning gas prices are going to jack up, and that is exactly the reason why Biden said that in his speech. I don't know where we're going to be in 24 hours. I don't even know exactly where we are now from when I started recording this video. But I want you to remember, when they call you, when they send that letter to your house, if you're in the United States, when they send that letter to your house asking you for selective service, saying that you need to come to the front lines because you're a man under the age of 56 and they can ask for anybody up to 56 for special purposes, well, you will be going to fight a banker's war for the elites to hide the corruption that they've done over the last 2 years. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to fight for that? Now, Ukraine, I love Ukraine and they deserve their own destiny, but that's not something that I'm willing to die for. And that's not something anybody in the United States of America should be worried about dying for. But they will ask you to, and they will ask your children to. Remember this. So, hopefully I'll probably kick off the next video with something a little bit later, but this is important and it needs to be said. So, God, please protect us all from the coming insanity that is coming. And if you like my videos, please like, share, subscribe below, comment, and let me know what exactly is going to happen with all this. Do you think that that this is going to end up in World War III, or do you think people will just ignore it and hope Putin goes away? Well, I guess we'll see, won't we? Feel free to support me in the support links below, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.